Okay, for my final lesson on using Adobe Premiere as an editing program is to create a title. Now, the title maker within this program is actually pretty good. It can rival Photoshop, but not really come close to touching it though. Just so you know, you can create titles in Photoshop or Illustrator, both Adobe products, and have full control of everything you want to make. But if you're not an expert Photoshop user already, it can be a somewhat complex program to master, like they might for local television news or Hollywood productions, anything like that. So the title maker inside of Premiere is really good for us to use. So instead of importing Photoshop files, we're going to create our titles from right inside of the program. All right, to make a title, there's a couple ways you can get there. One is to go to File, New, and you'll find Title. You'll also see Control T. You could hit Control T to bring up the title maker. You can right click, New Item, Title, or lastly this little button here for New Item. I like using this. There's title right there. So however you choose to get the title, choose it. It brings up the title maker. Now it sets it to their already set parameters to your project. So the only thing you have to deal with is a name. I'm going to call this main title. And of course we can make other titles too and put them throughout the video to match some of the lyrics that he sings, but we're going to keep this one easy and just get a main title in. Okay, so the main title window comes open and it has some parts to it. If you're not seeing any of these parts, any of these panels that are on the left and the right and the bottom, they can be found from Window and any of these particular panels that you want to see. These are all of them down here. Okay, so here's our title maker. I like that the title safe is on. What this does is helps us to line up or align our text, especially if we want to be center, left, right. If you don't see it, you can simply turn on what's called title safe. I usually turn on safe action as well so that I can see my little boxes and markers. Okay, you notice I just clicked and it created a title. I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard to get rid of that. You have a tool panel up here. Essentially a mouse and a text. You can also do text in other directions. There's even some pen tools. We'll talk about all of this, including shapes, by the time this tutorial is over. The main window here that we're going to create our title in, actually we can see the video through it. There's an eyeball here letting us see through. Right now there's nothing at this point in video. We are right now in a black area. If we were to move down in time, I'm going to scroll the time bar down. Now you can see that we are over some of the pictures and the pictures showing through. This is good because if I put a title in, I want to make sure that the color of my text doesn't interfere with the background. You know, putting a white title here would be kind of hard to see because the white background would absorb it. Same with black on black and so on. Okay, I'm going to go back to the beginning. So I'm in the black area where our main title will be. We have some title properties over here that we're going to work with first. Please, for the most part, I'm going to go ahead and collapse all these triangles to simplify it. I would like you to do the same so that everything is closed. Don't use the title presets at the bottom. We'll talk about those a little later. For now, I want you to learn how to actually create something on your own from scratch. So here we go. First, I'm going to make sure I select the text tool, the regular T, and I'm going to click in the window, and I'm going to type the words. Well, I'm going to type Mr. Coles, and on the second line it would be project. But I'm going to stick with one line. You could put your name. Type whoever you are right here. And it creates the title. Now, I'm going to highlight this text. I can highlight it to select it, or if I click away with the mouse pointer and just click on the box, all of it is still selected. What's nice about clicking in and selecting is you can select some of it and make some adjustments over here to just some of the text or all of the text. That's up to you. Okay, so all of it is selected. I'm going to open the transform box first. Now this has not much to do with making the text different, but it has to do with positioning. Opacity is how see-through it would be. Now unfortunately this is not keyframeable, so you'd have to leave the title up and you could put it in Premiere and then add opacity keyframes or dissolves in the timeline. The positioning X, Y, width, height, all interesting things to try. Rotation could come in handy as well. Again, you can animate rotations from the timeline, but this can just set text at an angle. So I'm going to leave it all alone. If I touch my mouse pointer and grab this, you'll notice that the position changes the same exact way as this does. You'll notice that I could make it height and width go up manually. So using these controls is helpful, especially if you're trying to match titles from one text to another by knowing what the numbers are, but that's about it. So I'm going to go ahead and close Transform down, readjust my title and put it here in the middle. And I'm going to open Properties. Now Properties is very common to things you'd find in like Microsoft Word. First would be the font family or the type of font. Now you could click and try to type it in directly or just hit the box here and you get a drop down menu that you can pick various font styles. Now what is nice inside of this program is you can also, instead of clicking and having to go back in, you can just use your arrow key on the keyboard and click through and look at different fonts until you find one that you like. So that's a nice thing. I'm going to go with this one. The font style, bold, italics. Right now bold is all it's offered. Different fonts offer different font styles, including bold, italics, and even underlined. The font size is simply, is it bigger or smaller? We kind of already did this before. So font size makes all letters height and width bigger and smaller in unison. Aspect can actually leave the size or the height alone, but you can squish more things in to a line. I'm going to leave all this the way it was. You can also do this manually, as you can see, as I make the changes. That'll change. Leading. Leading essentially, oops, isn't going to be something we're going to deal with here. Hold on a second. Put leading back to 0. Okay. Kerning, though. Kerning will spread the letters out. Sometimes you want a different effect or look to your text. You can spread them out with kerning, so that's good. Tracking is actually similar, but it has a slightly different reason, but they are very similar. Baseline shift. I'm going to move the title over and click away. I'm going to make a new title. And I'm going to type, I'd like you to do the same, H2O, letter O. Now that would, of course, be what you would know in science as water, but there's a problem with the 2. It should be dropped down a little bit. So I'm going to double click and highlight the 2. I'm going to go up here to font size and make the 2 a little smaller. And then I'm going to come down to baseline shift, the one we left off on. I'm going to drop the 2 down. So you can see now, when I click away, we get a nice H2O. So we could have also played with the kerning if we'd like to make the O be a little closer, further away. Okay, so that's kind of nice. Really good controls over your titling so far. You can also do something, delete this one, make a new text box, and say 50th, 50th. Now that TH is kind of large, so I'm going to highlight it and make it smaller. And then I'm going to use the baseline shift to bring it up. And a nice looking 50th. Alright, so try that. Just make sure you understand how to use baseline shift and know that it does come in handy for offsetting your text. Delete. Back to my Mr. Coles, or your name. Slant, simply slants it, gives it your own italics look. I'll leave it up and down. Small caps turns your small letters into small but capital letters. It's kind of cool, actually. Small cap size works with this, how big those caps would be. Okay, underline, pretty common. Distort, it's one of my favorites. It has an X and a Y, or top and bottom versus left and right. Let's try the X. One direction will make the bottom squish. Looks like an evil font. The other direction pinches the top. Okay. Y, same thing. Left and right are the only differences. do a lot to the titling, as you can see, just by playing with the properties of the font. I'm going to go ahead and put that back to 0. So now you understand everything in properties. Let's go ahead and close properties and open fill. Fill has to deal with the color inside of the title. There's a color box and an eyedropper. The color box allows me to change the color by clicking on it. I have to use this to find a color range and then come in here and click on the actual color I want so I can see the new color versus the original. When I hit OK, the color becomes that color. So that's pretty easy. I'm making it a solid fill right now. We'll talk later about some of these other items. The opacity is how dark is the color. If I make it see-through, and there's, let me move the video over, and there's pictures behind it, you can still see the images through the titling because it's opaque. Put it back at 100%. Another good thing to know is you can use the eyedropper to bring color from your video or your picture into your title, which helps to make things uniform. I'll use the eyedropper tool. I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab my skin tone. So now it's hard to read. Maybe some of this brown in my hair. And make it that color. I'm going to go back to green for now. So color, the eyedropper, solid, pretty easy stuff. Opacity makes it see-through or not. Alright, now the other things that make color interesting is what else you can do with color. I'm going to come back off of this picture back to my black background, and I'm going to change solid to linear gradient. Please do the same. So now I can set two colors in a line or linear gradient horizontally. They can also be turned, but we'll just stick with this for now. Color 1 and color 2. I'll click on color 1, it's already green. That's good enough, I can change it, but we'll leave it. I'll go to color 2, click on that, and then click on the color box to pick a different color, like purple. And you can see now that I've got a two-toned title with two colors in it. If I move these boxes, it changes where that color line is on the actual text. The further apart, the more of a blur you get between them. The closer they are together, the more of a definitive line that you get. That's a straight line because they're touching. So that gives you some interesting ways to do a linear gradient with two colors. The stop opacity, you could actually make the second color not quite as normal color that adds black to it. You could also change the angle and then move your color bar around and get the look you're after. So a linear gradient, if you repeat it, this is cool, you can get, especially if it was red and white, a candy cane effect. I get little bars going through. So depending on the number of repeaters you add is the number of bars that are added. And this distance controls how many. So if I increase the distance, I increase the coverage of the lines. So if I change this one to white and the second one to red, we have sort of a candy cane. Change the angle a little bit. Okay, interesting. So that would be a linear gradient using repeats, angles, color on both items, all linear. I'm going to change this back to solid. Goes back to white for now, or one color at least. Let's go to a radial gradient this time. A radial gradient is similar to a linear, but it does it in a circular fashion. So first I need to set two colors. I'll leave one white, and I'll set the second one to red. Still have the repeater on. I'm going to turn that off to 0. It'll do things in circles this time instead. The distance between has a lot to do with how much red you'll end up seeing. It's circular, so it's coming from the outside to the in. So I need to position this the way I want for it to have the coloring effect. Now I can also change the color stop opacity to darken it, change the angle of the circle. It doesn't do much when it's a circle here. I can also do the repeater, which adds little lines, just a few repeaters. Let's spread this out and get another interesting looking title. So radial gradients are cool too, similar to linear gradients. Finally, 4-color is the only other one I'll do in this tutorial. It gives you options to color all 4 corners. I'll leave one white, make the second one over here green, make the third one over here red, and the fourth one, let's make it blue. And you can see I have sort of a rainbow sherbet. Let's make the first one, the white one, yellow. Get some solid rainbow action going on here. So that part's pretty cool. I can set all 4 of the colors based on touching them. There's not much more you can do to it, unfortunately. Photoshop, I could really get into controlling the colors, but it gives you the ability to use a 4-color gradient and make interesting combinations of colors. Alright, I'm going to go back to solid. So pick green this time. Sheen and texture are pretty easy. If I add a sheen, I check the box and it puts a white sheen through it, or the color I choose. Right now it's white. The size of it, the angle of it. So this is a little bit different than doing a linear, because I'm getting something in the middle that I can control, the offset, where it sits. And it's sort of like a light reflection. So that's kind of cool too. I can change the color of the sheen to something else, but I think white looks best sometimes. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the sheen, and I'm going to go to texture. If I hit the texture box, well, there's no texture selected, but any texture like a brick wall or something else that I want to use, if I click on it, I'm going to go find myself a texture for you. It would have to be a photograph, let's say. You can put your picture inside of your title. It'll have some odd effect to it. Why don't we try that first? Go to pictures. I'm going to find a simple photograph. I don't know what any of these are without looking. So how about I take all sorts of school announcement stuff here. Let's take Malachi from a few years ago. And right now he is repeated inside of my title. And I can do some things like scaling him so I can make him fit better. I can change some of the settings itself. Essentially, I don't do this much with pictures. I don't think it works well. Alignment, the X and the Y, where all these faces sit. Offset. You see they're all repeated essentially, so you can do different things. Blending, how much of it is there versus a color. So you can kind of play with this a little bit. I don't think this is as useful as an object when I do it this way, but if I go ahead and grab something like a brick wall, I think that you can find, I'm going to find where this is. Somewhere in here I have textures. High, color. Here's a brick wall. Okay. You could find one on Google, but now it puts a brick wall inside that has a lot more potential for me to use as a solid actual fill for a title. Anything else is probably a little bit goofy. I'm not going to add a texture, so I'm going to take that off and close it. So now we understand everything about fill. Many things you can do to color instead of just a solid. I'm going to close fill, and I'm going to open, if I turn off fill incidentally, it would turn off the color, which is interesting because if we go to strokes and add, say, an outer stroke, and right now it's black, so I'm going to have you click on it and turn it to white. We could have basically an outlined word with no color at all. This could come in useful over video clips because it's see-through completely. Okay. But I'm going to turn the fill back on by clicking it. So now I have a white stroke over my green. We put an outer stroke in. The thickness is controlled by the size. Edge or depth or drop face would just change the type of stroke it is. So that's kind of cool. Gives it sort of a 3D look. I'm going to leave it with edge. So size, type, I could add a linear gradient so that I have two-tone color inside of here. Remember, picking two colors simply makes, and this is happening on the stripe only, the stripe, the line, not on the color inside because we're working with just the strokes, but that's kind of cool. Make it look sort of frozen. I could go back to solid. We have radial, so we would do it in a circular fashion. We could do 4 color corners of the stroke line. You've seen this when we did the previous fill lesson. I think you get the idea. I'll try this one for fun, just to give you a quick view. So I think you can see that you are getting 4 colored lines. Okay, I'm going to put this back to a solid yellow. So it's an ugly yellow. Let's brighten it up a little. Solid yellow. The opacity is how much of it you want to see, 100% or less. I can add a sheen or texture. Putting texture could be interesting, like a brick edge, but I think other than that, texture is useless. But the sheen could look pretty interesting. Let's add a white sheen. I need to make it a little bit bigger so you can notice it. You see how the center went from yellow to white? Let's make it more offset. Let's make it red so you can tell the difference. There it is. I'll make the size a little smaller. So it's just a sheen along the lines, not the fill. So similar to the fill controls, but a little different because it controls only the line. I'm going to turn the sheen back off. So outer stroke. Now I could add more than one outer stroke. If I hit add again, it'll add a second stroke that's black. I'll make it white. And now I have white over yellow over the green interior. I'll make the yellow a little bigger so you can see it. And I'll make the white bigger so you can tell they're all there. I'll make the white really big, yellow a little bit bigger. So I can make interesting text this way using more than one stroke. You can also, let me turn off one of the strokes and make this smaller. I can also add inner strokes. I'm going to go to the inner stroke, close the outer, and hit add for inner stroke. It puts a stroke on the inside. Let's change it to pink. And if I make it larger, it goes towards the center, towards the fill. So again, more than one way to deal with your lines beside adding solid versus linear radial gradients, 4 color gradients, going edge or drop face, opacity, adding sheens to the lines. You can add numerous lines in and out. In and out. I'm going to turn off the inner stroke that we just added and just stick with the single stroke here. Personally, I don't want any stroke. So I'm going to go back to the stroke and I'm going to turn off this one as well. Okay, so there's my title. What the heck, I'll put that outer stroke back on, the white one, make it smaller. Okay, now you know what strokes are. Shadows are what you'd expect them to be. I'll turn on a shadow. Let's turn it to a different color so you can see it. How about like a pink shadow? It's back there. I have to play with its size and angle, the distance away, the size, the opacity of it, the spread. It kind of diffuses it. So everything about shadow is pretty easy, as you would expect a shadow to be, and you can kind of set it to where you think it should be based on sunlight's direction, but that would be essentially a shadow. If I decide to add a background, I can add a color or an image to the background here, but I can also simply just put the background in the timeline. As you see, any pictures that are in the timeline automatically become a background when I put the title in here. So that's one way to put a background in. But you might also, let's go back to black video, you might also want to add your own background of a color or a picture. Sometimes it's okay to put a picture in here as a background so you can work with it. I'm going to go ahead and choose white. And I get a white background. And I can change a sheen or a texture to it. And get it some different looks to what I'm after here, but I don't really like any of this. If I decided to put an image in as a background, actually this is just for solid colors, so I still have to put a picture in here. So that's how you put a solid color background in on your picture. I'm going to leave it black. Okay, so now you know everything that exists inside of the title properties for your titles. That shadow's got to go. Okay, the next thing you would want to know then is, well, what about down here? Well, these are all preset titles, so if I click on it, it will turn my title into that preset, which if I open up the controllers, I can see the controllers have been preset to have certain things done to make it have that look. So you could create any one of these presets on your own, or simply use a preset and then adjust the preset to fit your style that you're after, like this, and you can get what you were looking for. Alright, so that's interesting to see. I'm going to go here to this preset, which is just simple solid text. Okay, what else can we learn? Well, a few more things. As you noticed, you can leave things left justified, center them, or put them on the right, which comes in great when you have lines of text. Shapes and following titles is the only other things left. I'm going to make another text by sliding this out of the way for a minute. If I were to add a shape, I could draw the shape in and then get some controls like strokes or fill color. Fill color is white. Let's make the outer stroke be blue. And now I have a blue line on a white box. And I could put my title inside of this box. Of course, it's behind it, but that's easy to fix. If I right click on the square or the rectangle, I can arrange it to the back. And now I can put my title inside and have sort of a title box. So that's something to consider. Other shapes are very useful as well. I find this shape comes in handy for a lower third name holder for videos. Open it up, place it with a little bit of it off the screen, and then you can take a different colored title and put it in here. So shapes come in very handy. Lines I use to draw lines across the screen. I probably don't want a stroke on that. And I can control how thick the line is. I need to touch the line. The line's properties, the line's width. Comes in handy for putting lines in for frames. So different shapes have different purposes that could be very helpful in your title maker. And everything is layerable. I'm going to move my title back down and try a couple more tricks for you. Titles of different directions. So next to the shapes you'll have vertical type tool and path tools. A vertical type tool simply adds text going down. So that's pretty easy. Delete that. A path text tool requires you to draw a path that the title will follow. Now this requires a little bit of skill in learning how to handle this tool. So if I click once, only once, it puts the first dot. Then I want to make a second dot. Let's make it here in the middle of the screen. I'm going to click and hold. Don't let go, because then I can bend the line. Alright, now I'm going to let go. If I click again, it'll make another dot. So I'll make one right over here. And it starts another bent line, which if I were to not let go, I can still adjust it. The minute you let go, you lose control. I'd have to go back and click on it. But now I'm just moving it around. So if you mess up, you can always delete it and try to make your line again. Once you've made a line of some sort, it's easy now to use your mouse pointer to double click inside of the line and type your text on the line. Now the text didn't fit, no biggie. I can highlight it and I can make the text smaller so it does fit. So now I can follow the line, which comes in great if I have maybe shapes in the background or putting it over a line that's in an image. So typing path lines for your text is quite a cool thing to do as well. If I use the other one, it does the same thing. Let's make a bended line. Remember, it's click, second click, hold and drag. change to the mouse, double click. This puts the text following a line, but smaller, sorry, not smaller, on its side. I'll make it smaller. That could have uses as well. I'm going to delete this. So now you can understand what the other title T's are for. Other than that, most of the other things I'm going to leave alone. You've got a pretty good skill set now to understand how to use this title making tool. So I've got Mr. Coles right here in the middle. If I wanted to make more than one title, just like the title I'm making already, keeping the same formats and presets so I don't have to do it over and over again, this button is your best friend. If I click on it, it'll make another title with a new title number based on the current, so that I can make a second title. Now I've got the same exact font settings as the previous title did. I'll show you how this works. So now if I bring the titles into the timeline, I just close the titler out. You don't have to save, it does it automatically. This was the title I just created, video. The other one is hidden in one of my folders here because I was doing something earlier. So it would be title 2, title 02, no space, I think. And spell title right. Title space 02. What happened to title 2? This has to be capitalized. Oh, I called it main title, that's why. Okay, so I put the main title in, and I've got myself two titles. Both that can be moved separately from each other if I want to animate them. Have one go up, one go down, something like that. Click on it, and you get the same exact controls pictures have for setting keyframes for the title. Doing anything you want to it, wherever it is. I'm actually going to delete that second title and just work from one title for now. Double click on it. Mr. Coles Picture Project. So I just clicked in the same text box and hit return so I could have two lines. I'm going to use centering to center it. And I think Picture Project's too large for Mr. Coles, so I'm going to highlight it and I'm going to make it smaller. So yours should look similar to mine. I think Picture Project's a little bit too far away from Mr. Coles, so I'm going to use baseline shift to move it up. Okay, so Mr. Coles Picture Project. I'm going to resize it a little bit. Something like this. Okay, in the center of the screen. Alright, so now at this point, I'm done making a title. So I'm going to close the title maker. I've already got the title in my timeline, and I'm putting it here at the beginning. So if I make it longer to match the beginning of the song over here to the first picture, I notice there's no music here at the very beginning. So I'm going to actually start the picture at the first beat, right there at 4 frames. I'm going to cut off using the little tool here. Okay. Now I want to add an effect, the lightning effect. You've done effects before. Haven't tried lightning yet. I type lightning and find it. Under video effects, I drop it on the main title, and it puts lightning, but here's the problem. It puts it only on the title, the size of the image. If I make the title bigger, then the text is huge to get the lightning to be larger. Actually, no, that works out better than I thought. Cool. So I can add an endpoint and a start point that are different than the settings. I have to play with it to figure out how to grow it. There it goes. And it's going right behind my title. I can move it up or down. And essentially now the lightning is running right behind my text. And you can see that it's wiggling as we go through like electricity would. If I wanted to add extra lightnings, I could get more than one strand, but we're going to stick with one strand. To get it to look really kind of cooler than this, you can do some of the playing with so many controllers that exist in this one. I wanted to show you a high-end visual effect and what the controls can be like because it is a little crazy. You can even change the color, white and blue. Maybe I make it white and purple. So that gives you that idea. The width is how wide the lightning is, how much variance there is. There's so many changes that can be made. How many branch segments are there? The speed. How stable is it? Making it a little bit too crazy. Slow the speed down. Branching amplitudes, detail levels. You can do quite a bit to this. You can actually change the point of start and end by clicking on it and dragging it. So I could actually make it come off screen and maybe strike my name. Since it runs the whole time, to strike my name I would have to set keyframes to have it start here as time went on, or just beforehand I'd have to have it off the screen. Comes on, then have it back off the screen again. And the speed is based on how close these keyframes are together. So if I wanted to strike very quickly, I'd have to move the keyframes very close together. And that's interesting, but I'm going to go ahead and take all that off and undo it all. Now, if you want to get back to a spot after doing a lot of edits, if you go to your history panel, you can actually click on a point in time and put this back in any spot you want for a certain amount of time. But it does come in handy to undo some quick edits that you did and get back to what you're after. So that pretty much makes a lightning behind our title. You know, kind of cool. You can now use your title maker along with videos. If you have a title and you place that title over the top of a picture, it simply shows over the picture. And then I can still, you know, animate the picture, the video, whatever I was trying to do. Okay, that's enough. So that's the end of lesson 9. You now know how to use Adobe Premiere pretty well. I'm going to save my project. You're ready for an export lesson. It's a very short lesson. It's how to take videos and take them off of the computer so you can have them for upload to the internet or to put on a DVD or on your own thumb drive.